The areas to cover are street cleaning, commercial waste, domestic waste management and garden waste, green estate management, environmental enforcement and recycling. Councillor Wakeham, lead, Anthony Payne, Philip Robinson, Nicola Home and Nicola Home. Thorn. Sorry, I couldn't see that. I just said the H looked like a V on that angle. Sorry. Okay. So if Councillor Wakeham would like to open the proceedings, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity, firstly, to address this budget scrutiny session, looking at environment and street scene. I would like to make a few introductory remarks before taking any specific questions or observations you have on the proposals for 23-24. I think that we can perhaps all agree that the last few years have proved incredibly challenging in not only ensuring the safe delivery of operational street scene and waste services during and following the pandemic, but also delivering statutory services in that context of unprecedented budget challenges, wholly driven by changes in customer behaviour and, of course, inflation. For instance, we have not escaped the national trend in seeing more people continue to work from home, leading to an increasing cost of domestic waste disposal as waste tonnages increase. Even with every favourable contracted disposal costs at the MRF and with the MVV, the service has had to manage an additional pressure of over £600,000. We have also seen the cost of fuel and unscheduled maintenance increase, which has further exasperated our operating costs due to managing an ageing vehicle fleet and the delays to replacement vehicles brought on by the pandemic and the scarcity of raw materials, such as those required to produce microprocessors. Nevertheless, we continue with our fleet replacement plan and have purchased a further 13 vehicles this last year, and will continue to look at the suitability and cost of converting our remaining fleet to alternative forms of fuel in the coming years. So let me briefly highlight some of the achievements we've made during the last year. We've collected over 100,000 tonnes of domestic waste, emptying over 6 million bins, turned commercial waste collection into a profitable service with more contracts in the pipeline. We have successfully rewilded more acres of grassland, the management of which has been brought an additional 45 hectares into positive management, plus 24 hectares of tree planting, plus a further 54 hectares planned for this season. 145 hectares of mixed habitat enhancements across 9 sites. We've planted 850 metres of new hedgerow. A community tree nursery which has been established with capacity to grow 7,000 trees. 128 signed plastic-free charters with commitments from business, leisure, tourism, education and community sectors. We've had 8 dives in Mountbatten and Mutton Cove and removed a total of 2,073 kilometres of plastic angling line, 620 kilograms of steel and 2,000 kilograms of tyres, and winners of the Association of Public Services Excellence Parks Innovation Award 2022 for the use of our digital technology with communities to support nature recovery across the city, particularly through our Green Minds project work. We're winners of the Police Commissioner Awards for Citizens in Policing Award focused on green minds and worked with Keam primary schools for their contribution to the green spaces of Keam. National Award won for Inclusion and Diversity within the Kickstarter programme, PC nominated by the DWP for this award. Turning to the budget, I am pleased to say that the budget for 23-24 has addressed a number of long-standing legacy pressures in street scene and waste, which include staffing pressure, streets, 627,000, vehicle fuel and maintenance, 446,000, waste tonnage and additional costs, 628,000, grounds maintenance, 700,000. However, on the other side of my net budget of 17,588, there are the challenges of income generation and saving targets, which include charging for garden waste, 530,000, charging for non-household waste, 177,000, bin delivery charge, 32,000, route optimization of waste collection, 290,000. So whilst we have managed to address legacy pressures, we have some challenging targets to meet in terms of savings. What I would say at this point is that, however, this cannot be all about increasing income, but as much about reducing costs and changing behaviour. Ultimately, we would like to see the residents home compost more, leading to a reduction in operating costs and, of course, improving environmental outcomes. Also, charging for replacement bins has demonstrated, when we last did this, that it reduces demand on bins and therefore costs. The charges on household waste also encourages people to reduce and reuse, which is consistent with the government's waste and resource strategy. Moreover, it has not led to an increase in fly tipping. We had hoped to be able to say more about the Environment Act, but the consultation, which was due last April, will now not be finalised until early February. However, we most certainly expect to see the introduction of separate food waste collections at some point in the future, and we will also look to increase the city's domestic recycling rate, which, as most of us know, has been historically very low and below the national average, unfortunately. Even so, our focus will be on reducing and reusing, and we will look forward to working with Councillor Poyser to see how we might further develop a reuse partnership within Plymouth. Finally, my focus will be on developing policy to support the service to meet the demands of the government's resource and waste energy, whilst understanding the full implications of the Environment Act. My other challenge will be to meet residents' expectations in light of budget challenges. In respect of the latter, I will continue to enjoy the opportunity of spending time with the streets, waste and cleansing teams and hear directly from residents about their concerns. And I do like to talk to the residents when I'm out with the teams, because you do learn a heck of a lot, and you know, the way they perceive what we're doing. And it also provides me with an opportunity to see firsthand the sometimes harsh conditions that our frontline staff are working. And on that note, I want to thank them for what they do, and I want to also thank my officers for the excellent work they do. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wakeham. Councillor Lowry, if you'd like to give.
Councillor Wakeham, I want to go on one of the comments you made about recycling and the Environmental Act that's coming into being. And I know that last time I dabbled in this area with respect to the government's policy around reuse, things like green waste or brown bins, food waste, as you've already mentioned, and glass collection and so on and so forth. And there's going to be a generic approach across England, I believe. Yeah. But that could result in us all getting new bins, for instance, or getting new vehicles and so on and so forth. And the cost of that would be exceptional to this council. So I just want to understand, bearing in mind that could happen in the next 12 to 18 months. I mean, it might take longer to actually come into being. What we're doing with respect to planning for that, because that would have a huge implications on our budget, please. So just, thank you.
Well, obviously, Councillor, it is a case of we are planning for it in the long term. We know very well it's going to be a costly adventure, but you know, when we look around now, we've got 13 new green vehicles. That's costly, a lot more costly than traditional vehicles. So we're going to have to find the budget to cope with it, which we are already planning.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Larry, no, you're absolutely right. It's an exciting time, if I'm honest. I think there is certainly a lot of hard work involved in bringing in a new service. You mentioned food waste. DEFRA have reassured us that there will be both revenue and capital funding to support those local authorities that currently don't do don't do food waste. I'm hoping, I'm not holding my breath, but I'm hoping that we're going to get some clarity on that by the end of this month, is what we were promised. We originally promised April last year, but you know, you can understand that these things get delayed, but I'm confident that we will get the resources, particularly the capital resources, to support that change. When it comes in, I'm quite honestly not expecting anything before 2025, 26.
Oh, sorry.
Chair, could I add to that?
Yes, by all means, sir.
Okay. So, I mean, just building on what Philip's saying, I mean, I've got this national role as well as the ADEC Vice President. So we keep an eye on this really closely through my national contacts. So we are still waiting for clarification from government. So we're not missing out on anything, because I'd be able to pick it up through those national conversations. In terms of what will come out from government, it will influence us on the types of collections we will be doing going forward, whether we have curbside sort or whether it's separate vehicles or whatever. So there'll be a number of choices that we will have to make. In terms of food waste, my understanding, as Philip has said, my understanding as it currently stands is we will get some revenue support to help us with the implementation and develop business cases. But for those authorities that have not got, because some authorities have already got food waste collections, obviously, quite a significant number. For those authorities that have no food waste capacity at present or collection capability, there will be funding made available, as we understand it, from central government to support the infrastructure required to make it happen. But until we see it, it's really difficult to know what it will be. So until we see that, Councillor, it's really difficult to predict what the financial impacts on us will be. But once we get the detailed information, then we'll be able to start doing some work on it. But Philip's absolutely right. I don't think it will come into play at the earliest for delivery in 25, 26. That's my understanding. It could be later. And the final point to make is, depending upon that date, may be dependent upon your local circumstances and depending upon what contracts you've already got in place. So, for example, we have a PFI contract and an energy from waste plant, and the consequences on that may be taken into consideration as to the start date of food waste collection. So there's a number of factors that will come into play in any decision that we have to make about start dates and the type of facilities and type of vehicles we're going to need. So it'll be a lot of work, but until we've got more detail, it's really difficult to predict it, if I'm being perfectly honest. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Poyser, please.
Thank you, Chair. Question to Councillor Wakeham. It's about making use of some of the really good assets we've got in the city. So we've got Cheltenham MRF, haven't we? We've also got a commercial waste fleet, which I'm really pleased to hear that you've turned a corner and it's now making a profit. Do you think we've been ambitious enough in maybe promoting our commercial waste service? The waste market's changed in the last 2 or 3 years. Is there a bigger market share we could capture? Is there revenues that we can generate from that we could help fund other services? And also linking back to the MRF, you know, partnership working with other authorities, is there income that we could generate from the use of the MRF as well as processed materials, and again to fund other services or subsidise other services?
Yes, Councillor Poyser. I think we can generate more income generally. I don't know what we're at the moment, but I think about 6 or 7%, something like that, and we're aiming for 10% of the market. Most of the commercial waste that we're dealing with is coming from around the city centre at the moment, I believe, but we will be looking to enlarge on that in the future, and I think we've got an excellent team that are dealing with it, so everything looks pretty good.
Yeah. If I can just put some numbers on there, you don't have to go back that far. and the commercial waste service was costing the wider service about 150k a year. It's now making 150k a year. We've got a couple of larger value contracts coming on later this year, which I'm happy to discuss with you offline. And we've taken on 200 additional customers. We've got an excellent head of commercial waste who's created a 5-year strategic plan for commercial waste plan. And I think we've got all the ingredients to build on that. You know, taking the advice of Councillor Lowry a couple of years ago, start small, build big. I think we're at that point now where we can relaunch the service. You'll have seen the purple bins around the city. And I think it's one of the areas that we can grow. In terms of the MRF, I'm already in discussions with a couple of the larger waste companies as to how we might sweat that asset.
Supplementary.
No supplementary, that's good. Thank you.
Councillor Kelly, please.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of rehearsed this question earlier, Councillor Wakeham, but it was the wrong person I was addressing it to. You know my views and feelings with regards to charging for garden waste and indeed charging for bin delivery and non-household waste. The savings that you've alluded to are clear in the budget, and there's also one with regards to 290,000 about route optimisation. My question earlier was, you said about trying to change people's behaviours, and if you look at social media and certainly the people that have contacted me, it might be because I'm an advocate of it, they are a magnet towards me, I don't know, but the majority of people, and this is borne out in the figures, I think there's 52,000 that registered for garden waste under the old scheme. I think the payment scheme with the £39 early bird is about 13,000 that have signed up. I appreciate that might grow, but an awful lot have said, I'm not paying it. You know, you're increasing potentially the council tax and you're going to charge me separately. I know that's not out of line with other councils, but the mass feedback is, I will put it in my brown bin, I will deposit it somewhere else, or I will burn it. So from an environmental point of view, and we raised this with your colleague Councillor Stoneman, some of the policies don't seem to be driving the green credentials. You spoke about recycling. It's almost inevitable, if you accept it, that the green garden waste recycling will drop hugely tonnage-wise. But more specifically, my concern is that people will feed the waste that you're now going to charge, be it green or non-household, into their brown bin. That will increase the weight of those brown bins, not necessarily above the maximum limit. You then will have the teams going out on their optimised routes. The van will get filled more quickly. They've got to go to the incinerator more. So the savings that you've projected will potentially be floored with far more time, wear and tear on a vehicle, having to go to an incinerator at the same time recycling rates drop. So I'd just like to know the methodology of how you've arrived at it. And do you accept some of the points that I've made, or do you carte blanche say, no, I'm so wide of the mark that none of that will happen?
Well, thank you, Councillor Kelly. Firstly, the collection teams will be very aware of this problem. And I mean, they are asked to look at what goes in to the actual bin lorries. So the refuse collectors will be very aware of this problem. If they see this, they can put a label on the bin stating that we're not going to remove their bin if it's got the incorrect material in. So it's that simple on that particular item. Cost-wise, I think we've had to do this because obviously it's a shared responsibility of all departments to make sure that we're all playing our part. And we know the situation that the city was in, familiar with other councils, obviously, not just us. And on the other side of things, I think we need to look at the bigger picture. We want to start people recycling more. So we're going to be offering them a £10 discount on new compost bins. So in other words, you know, when this offer gets going, and I'm sure Andy can enlarge on that in a minute if he wants to, then people will be able to go to whatever supplier, and I think, will there be 5?
Yeah, do you want me to?
Yeah, no, just a second, sorry. So if we've got 5 suppliers, say, then people can go and collect them from their local garden centre or wherever it might be. And if they've got this incentive, I'm sure that will help in the long term, because we must encourage home composting. And, you know, I think if we can do that, we really will be perhaps enhancing our green credentials more. And that's what we've got to do. And also it'll reduce the costs of us running around collecting green waste. And this is going to be a big important thing in the future. Just think of how much fuel we use, when we're actually out and around, because the vehicles are stopping and going, and the wear and tear on vehicles as well. So, I think that we're doing the right thing. Sorry.
May just answer the question. So I think just stepping back from what we're trying to do here at the moment, garden waste is a non-statutory service. We've provided it free of charge for a number of years, and now we're asking residents to pay. But if you look at the waste hierarchy, which you'll all hear me go on about quite a bit over the next few years, recycling sits down in the middle there. And in an ideal world, before we get to recycling, we reduce and reuse. So I'd rather not do any garden waste collections. I'd rather everybody home composted and we didn't have to drive any vehicles around to collect garden waste. So I think that change of behaviour takes time. I absolutely get your point about the concern about residents putting their green waste in the residual bins, and some people will do that, absolutely, and where the crews see them doing that, then we won't collect the bins either before or after. But it's probably also just providing a bit of context. The cost of disposing of residual waste is about £90 a tonne. Green waste is about £60 difference, so it's £60 a tonne. So in terms of the cost associated with that service is not the disposal cost, it's the vehicle cost, it's the crew cost, it's the operating cost. And whether they're collecting it through the residual waste or the garden waste, it's the same cost, it's the same vehicles in terms of wear and tear. So I get your point about the fact that increased tonnage is still going to find its way to the same place.
So supplement, I mustn't have understood it very clearly then, because I clearly thought that the garden waste, whether it was charged for or not, actually went to be recycled, and that was an income for the council because it was sold on and used, not going into an incinerator. Well, other councils used green garden waste as an income stream. But my point is there's not a lot of clarity with regards to the bins. I've signed up for the early bird because I've got a relatively large garden. I don't think it's practical to put grass clippings and compost to any great degree. You will soon fill even a large recycle or a compost bin very quickly. So let's just assume Manamead Road, where I live, I've paid, my neighbour hasn't paid, the guy at number one's paid. The vehicle has still got to go the length of that road. You're now asking the crew to look out, as they did in the past, but which bins. But the big difference here is, in the past when the round or a bin was missed, you phoned up and invariably you had a follow-up and came back. It's now a contract that I am paying you, and therefore if you do not collect, I will either want a refund or you'll have to come out. And I think the potential conflict and bad feeling about that, because last year was a disaster, let's be honest with you, that is going to cause severe problems. And also, can you just clarify, you're going to charge people for them to have their black bin collected. My understanding was, though, if they kept that black bin, it's like being given free of charge and they can keep it free of charge. But I don't know anybody that's going to actually pay for you to come and take it back. I think you'll just end up with people keeping their black bin, and arguably there'll be a lot of people that probably present it out. I know there's maybe a sticker on it, but you're asking the teams to be looking, do an awful lot, which is going to slow down the whole route full stop. So I've got real flawed concerns about the potential savings, but also the green credentials throughout these policies.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Gay, I'll come back and then I'll let Andy come in because he's my expert in this area. What I would say is that, I hope he is anyway, we're providing a new service. It's a new service. There will be teething problems, and absolutely we're raising expectations because we're charging for that service. It does sound to me like one bin's not going to be enough for you. You might want another one, and if you order it before next week, you'll get it at the discounted rate. So if you're happy, if you want to order another bin, we will happily provide you with another bin for £39. But Andy, what would you like to add?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to comment. So we have committed to do 17 collections. So we've been quite specific in the terms and conditions. So it's not it's not generic like before where we said we do it April to November. So if for whatever reason we weren't able to collect, then we will add that on to the end of the season, and we're being quite clear about that. However, in the business case, and that's partly why the costs are higher than they are now, we put more resource into the service. So last year we struggled we had high levels of sickness. We still had a hangover from COVID at certain times of the year, so we really struggled to deliver that service. But it was also, in terms of priority, the lowest priority because we didn't have to do it. But now we're charging. It will be a high priority. We'll prioritise it over some other services, and we're sort of ready. We're going to be geared up and ready to deliver it. So we have made that commitment to residents. So I do understand why there's concerns because of what's happened in the last couple of years. But COVID did play a big part in our operational performance. In terms of, you're right. Obviously, we will be passing houses where they haven't paid, but we will be looking to sort of rationalise our rounds. So we won't just run the same services we did previously. So that'll be on the basis that they're spending less time on Manamead Road, so they can get onto elsewhere. So it's all going to be sort of optimised as far as possible. And then your other question was about the. Sorry, just mental block. You did an additional question at the end of about the. Just gone.
If there's any consolation, I've forgotten.
Yeah.
It was more the logic of the green credentials that run through these policies that we raised with Councillor Stoneman, and optimising your savings. Now you've said about the routes and you'll staff it differently. I get that, but from what I can see is and this in-cab technology was going to solve all the problems of the world, but it sadly doesn't seem to. You're going to be looking at number ones on it, number twos not. That's going to constantly change as people, arguably, they've already paid up front because you had to pay up front. But there is going to be a big risk of man hours with extra complaints when people are paying for a separate service. Yes. And I just don't believe that the savings that you're predicting will manifest when you factor in all these different elements. That's my concern.
We did take quite a cautious approach, so we've put in not just resource operationally, but also in the back office. So we've got an extra person in business support funded. So yes, I do. Yeah, we have the same concerns, which is why we've put those costs in. So we'll have to see how it pans out, but we're ready to deliver it. The question you asked before as well, sorry, it was about the collection charge. So we were trying to protect council resources because if say 28,000 households register, which is what we're sort of working towards out of the current 60,000 households that previously registered, we've got potentially 30,000 bins in the city. So if we just said, yes, we'll come and collect your bin, the logistical challenge of collecting 30,000 bins would be quite significant and probably blow out any sort of savings we may have made. So that's why we're offering people the choice. You can keep your bin, you can go to Chelsen, you can pre-book a slot and return it there free of charge, or we'll come and collect it for £10. And yes, we're not expecting it to be really popular, but with that volume, even if a small percentage take it up, it could keep one of our collection rounds very busy for a few weeks. So that was the rationale.
Chair, just very quickly, did you say that the savings in the budget then is based on a sign-up rate of 28,000? Because the last figures I've seen was around about half that figure, and that was clearly with the incentive, and that's now gone. So are you disappointed with the sign-up rate to date?
So we forecast 28,000 households would register. We've had, it was just short of 14,000 yesterday, so that's the latest. The early bird doesn't end until the 12th of February. So we're expecting, not everyone's that organised. I know I'm probably the kind of person who'll register the day before it ends. People can then still register right up to the start of the season or even during the season, and they'll pay more for that. So we looked at other local authorities when we came up with that estimate. And we have got room to play. So obviously the costs will go down if less people register because we won't have as many crews potentially. So there are some variables in there as well.
Can I just bring up a point of clarification? You said about waste collections, £39 green bin, but then you went on to say, Philip, that if you bought another bin, I'm just saying with regard to the viewers and anybody watching it, to be absolutely clear, the £39 is for one green bin only. All right, so anybody watching this, yeah, the black bin, yes, for green collection. I think it has been discussed, and people have said, is there a way for people with bigger gardens that they could say purchase a green bin and pay, say, a bit of a discount on that? Is that been discussed, or?
So households can register up to 3 subscriptions, so it's 3 bins, but there's no discount, so it's £39 if you do it in the early bird per bin. And we have had quite a few households that have gone for more than 1 bin, quite a number, but there's no discount on that.
No, thank you for clarifying that point.
Thank you, Chair. One of my questions has kindly been answered about the early bird scheme, but could I ask Councillor Wakeham, there was a budgetary allocation for the SUDS project on Central Park. It started, and I dare say it was started in earnest. When will this project be completed?
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Well, in actual fact, we're hoping that by the end of July, it will be absolutely complete. So end of the summer, and yes, it should be all there. I know it seems slow at the moment, but it is making progress, or starting to. So I expect you've been around there recently, as I have, and it does look a muddy mess at the moment, I know. But they are working hard there from well, I'm assured that everything is going according to plan. So if they're up to schedule, then that's fine. Thank you.
No supplementary. Councillor Partridge, please.
Thank you, Chair. Question for Councillor Wakeham. Are the Swingo road sweepers, especially when they serve northwest Plymouth, are they able to use the Western Mill depot, or are they still forced to go all the way back to Chelsea Meadow?
Thank you. Well, in actual fact, we have a place where they can offload now at Western Mill. It's a big Ro-Ro skip container, so they don't have to come all the way back here. But that's a valid point, because at one stage they were having to travel all the way back to Chelsea Meadow from the north, which was taking a considerable amount of extra time. And I don't know how many hours they were losing a day, but I think we can all conclude that it was considerable. So thank you for that, Councillor Partridge.
A very quick supplementary, please. And on that basis, then, is Western Mill still going to be open to the public, regardless of staff using Western Mill to tip? There's a rumour flying around. If you could put some truth to that and put it to bed, that'd be good.
Councillor Partridge, do you mean is it likely to be closed?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. No, I've said for me it's an absolute red line. We can't afford to lose Western Mill because this is an expanding city, and as much as we've all heard rumours, I can tell you now that while I'm in control of this, Western Mill will stay open. I don't live in the north of Plymouth, but I think it's essential for that part of the city. So we need to ensure it's there for the long term, as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Hayden.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Councillor Wakeham. Before I actually ask my question, I would just like a bit of clarification from yourself, Philip. You did say that if anybody would like another black garden waste bin, phone up now and you would get one. So for them to do a garden waste bin, they would not need to have the 28-day approval and then wait 10 weeks for it. Is that correct, like you do for a brown bin at the moment? I just want a clarification on that.
We're actually we have been in a bad place in terms of deliveries. Part of that, there was a spike when the charge was removed for the delivery charge, so that we did get like quite an influx. We've actually managed to get that down, and the last I heard we were around about 60. So it's nothing like 10 weeks at the minute. And we certainly will be prioritising the delivery of garden waste bins ahead of the season. If people have paid, we'll make sure where possible we can get them their bin before the service starts.
Thank you. Can I ask my question now? You started, Councillor Wakeman, in your speech about there was no increase on fly tipping. I find that very hard to believe if you take a walk around the city, to be honest with you. Could you tell me where in the budget that you might have been able to give extra money for fly tipping? Because I think you will see a mass increase of fly tipping. One, the Conservatives did say that they would open Western Mill full time, and that hasn't happened. And two, with garden waste, I understand what you're saying, that if they put it in brown bins and the refuge collection see it, they won't collect it. Well, if you're not going to collect the bin, you're going to see an overflow of bins, and then Nicola Horn's team is going to be pulling her hair out because she's got bins spreading throughout the city. I know for a fact in St Budo, had many residents that have made it very, very clear to me that they will not be paying for it. One, because they can't afford to pay for it, to be very truthful with you. And some of these residents have quite large gardens, which is a real concern. So where in the budget have you allocated more finance for fly tipping, please?
Well, firstly, going back to fly tipping, Councillor Hayden, we've had a problem with fly tipping way before we were talking about this particular new venture. So I don't think that's applicable. I mean, obviously, we will be watching this space, and we will be doing everything to ensure that we don't get an increase. But, you know, the problem is when you start something new like this, as has already been said, you get teething problems. And we will have to take all these teething problems one by one and hopefully combat them and find a suitable solution. So we'll be working hard to do that.
Supplementary Chair.
Yes.
And I totally accept when you start something new, you will always get teething problems. Do you know what I mean? I was going to say I'm not green, but that's probably the wrong phrase to use.
Green's grass.
But green is grass, yeah. But fly tipping is on the increase in this city. Okay? So I'm wanting to know, forget garden waste, I'm wanting to know in this budget how we are financially going to support fly tipping.
So, 2022, we processed about 5,500 incidents of fly tipping, which wasn't an increase on the previous year. And as Councillor Wakeham said in his opening remarks, there is no evidence to suggest that fly tipping is on the increase statistically. Yes, it is one of our risks associated with not just this, but the reintroduction of charges at Chelsen for non-household waste. And it's something we've got to monitor very closely. If it reaches the point where we can't manage that within our existing cleansing budget, then we'll have to think about how we manage that. But at the moment, it's not the thing that's keeping me awake at night. I am aware of it. It is a risk, but we're managing it within the budget.
I just wanted to say thank you. I know I can't have any more, but obviously my casework and other councillors' casework is not coming through to you, so I need to make sure you definitely get it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
I'm glad, Philip, you were able to clarify that point. It's much appreciated. I think it sort of brings me to my point. When we previously charged for non-domestic waste, it led to huge queues at Chelsten Meadow, where people were trying to sort out this bag, that bag, and every bag. Now, we know for a fact that we can dispose of a bath in Chelsten Meadow free of charge, all right? But if you're taking your toilet out, you've got to break it up, put it into a black bag, which seems absolutely senseless and putting the general public at risk, let alone the staff, when they go to the tip, because there's no way of actually saying, there's a toilet pan, what's the charge? Because it's not in a black bin. Having spoken to various people, we all know that people within Plymouth, if you've got a small trailer, so 4 foot by 5'8", is it? Half a ton weight in that trailer is allowed 12 tips a year. To avoid the queues at the tip and somebody trying to go through this bag, that bag, and everything else, and having the queue going all the way back to Lara Bridge, would it be not feasible to consider as a recommendation that you charge for a small trailer? So if somebody comes in with a small trailer is £25, you go in, you dispose of your rubbish, the guy drives out, your council gets a payment and everybody moves on, but knowing over a 12-month period, they've only got 12 trailer tips anyway on their tag. To consider that as opposed to this, I think it's an absolutely nonsensical idea to actually go through one bag to go through another bag. So it's, as we know, there's various sizes of black bin liner. You've got a rubble sack that could be that small. You've got the bigger sacks. You go to Traeger Mills, it could be that big. You know, just to try and streamline the process so it helps not only the staff there, it generates an income for the city at the same time. It could be half the disposal waste. You know, say if it was a ton waste to go over the weighbridge, you know, just take on that the trailer is going to be half a ton, 500 kilos, that they pay a proportion of that charge to speed the whole process up. Is that something that's being considered?
I can certainly take that on board as a recommendation, Chair. I'm not aware of any queuing related to the current charges that we've imposed. Yes, there was initially when we had new members of staff and a new process trying to work through how we apply those charges. But the feedback I've had, it's been up and running now a couple of months, is that it's on track to generate the income. There's been very few complaints, and it's reduced our cost of disposal, which is of course why one of the reasons we're doing it. We want to encourage people to think differently about how they reuse and reduce the waste they create. But yeah, no, I'm more than happy to take that on as a recommendation.
So could, just as a supplementary, so the example I used of an old WC, how would that be disposed of? As somebody actually came up with it, and I thought it was quite a reasonable.
Yeah, as a point of order, we are digressing from budget scrutiny. We're almost doing a commissioning study.
But I was just saying with regard to cost, obviously.
On a toilet.
Yeah.
Can I just come in there, Chair? It is charged by a bag or item, and in actual fact, it's £1.50 to take a bag down there. So if you take a couple of bags, it's only £3, so it's less than a cup of coffee. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think the residents of the city have grown to love their free kind of garden waste service, haven't they? But, you know, I take the point that Philip's made around the waste hierarchy and encouraging people to manage their waste as close to the point in which it's generated as possible for home composting, and that transition to that way of dealing with green waste is got to be the way forwards. But it's not suitable for everyone, is it? Some people are going to be reliable on using the green waste bin still, the garden waste bin. I suppose my concern is the pace of change. Maybe we should have started introducing composting and home composting and promoting that a lot earlier. I think that the transition is a concern. As with every percentage point increase in maybe recycling, and you know, there's an avoided disposal and there's a revenue that's generated from that, isn't there? Same with home composting. There's an avoided disposal for the composting process because it's not a revenue generating scheme. So my point is the resource that's needed to allow this transition? Do we need to be looking at employing a recycling officer, which, you know, or people that we can capitalise that cost for the next few years to allow with this transition, which will allow us to deliver these changes and savings as well? They should be delivering savings for this council, but we need the resource to do that.
Sorry, yeah, so happy to answer that question. Yeah, we've, in the garden waste business case, we did look a little bit wider than just garden waste. So we looked at service reliability across the whole of our waste services. And we also, so in addition to the additional resource we put in there, we also put in 2 recycling officers, because over time those roles have kind of been disbanded. There's looking to be a restructure in the service. People have left. We've managed the recycling officer function within the waste team, but yes, we are looking to implement two recycling officers, and also working with our colleagues in strategic planning. We've got a lot of experience in behavioural change activity and how you sort of bring about resident change behaviour. So we're trying to work with them as well to do that in the future.
That's good to hear. I mean, I know the amount of resources required to enact that behavioural change, the dialogue and conversation and promotion you have to have with residents we have to make that investment. But I think for the long term, if we're putting money aside to invest in promoting our recycling services, increasing the recycling rate, which Councillor Wakeman said is below the national average. We need to get up. There's financial savings to be made there. And I think if we were to invest in promoting recycling, home composting, we could deliver some really big savings for the city as well as huge environmental benefits as well. And I would like to see that more of this in this budget.
You want to take that as a recommendation to be worked up for tomorrow when we consider recommendations?
If the committee were interested in taking that forward.
Discuss it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Put it on and discuss it.
Yeah. Of course, the point that Andy Sharp has made, we have put resource in there as part of this programme to do that, which will take us through this next financial year. If we feel it's insufficient and there's more we can do during the course of the year, we will look at that as part of our budget setting for the future years, depending upon success, uptake, and so on and so forth. There's one other point, well, there's two other points I wanted to make in relation to garden waste. One, clearly the decision to proceed with it's obviously been made and we're working on it. And we will, as it gets delivered and implemented, make sure we constantly review and see what we can do to improve and make it better if we need to. So that will be a given. We do that with all services. And I think the second point, which I think does need to be made, it is a non-statutory service, and we are not expected to provide it. So effectively, when it was free, everyone in the city who did not have a garden was subsidising people who have got gardens in the city for a service which not everybody could actually use. And that is the rationale in a lot of authorities as to why garden waste is a chargeable service. It is not statutory, not everybody uses it, and it's a service which is only usable for people who have actually got gardens. So that needs to be said, and I thought I should say.
Can I just bring Philip in on that?
Yeah, if I could just come back into the wider issue of recycling, which I think is the basis of your question, if I understand it correctly. You're absolutely right. We haven't invested the resources in encouraging people to recycle over the last few years. Some of that was down to COVID. We couldn't get out and about and speak to residents. You could say we've upscaled them, reprocessed them, repurposed them to other things. And that's something we're looking at. Historically, Plymouth does not have a good number when it comes to recycling. It's rarely above 30%. When we get garden waste, it goes higher, obviously, but that's something we want to measure on the next year. Notwithstanding, our priority has to be reuse and reduce. Ultimately, we want to reduce the amount of waste that's created at the top end of that hierarchy, because then you'll see the benefits of recycling fully. Thank you.
Councillor Coker.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to move, just if we can, away from garden waste. I've looked at your budget, Councillor Wakeham, and I think there is a very marginal increase in your overall budget for the next financial year. We all know, and this is not a criticism of your workforce, because I echo your comments about how hard the teams work. I think we need to lay on the table that we've had some real issues this year with back lanes. I still, like Councillor Hayden, perhaps I'm unlucky, but I dispute the amount of fly tipping that is generally going down, because it's certainly not going down where I represent. We've had problems this year with bins on the street, and I mean the public waste bins being left unemptied for weeks on end. We've also had where we've got fly tipping. I had an incident in my ward where it stayed on there for 6 weeks, even though I was told it was done. So this is what matters to the residents of Plymouth, that they see their build environment looking clean, looking tidy. they accept the challenges that we've got financially. So what I'm looking at you is what in this budget what are we gonna see from you and your administration that's different next year to what we've had to endure this year?
Thank you, Councillor Coker. Well, we know that we've all got challenges, manpower-wise, etc. But I can assure you that the figures are, well, I think, statutory. They're not increasing then, they're not going up. And I just hope we can continue to keep them under control. If you see these incidents, please email me personally and I will make sure that it's done. And, you know, it is my responsibility and that's the way I see it. But I just think that, you know, as a team, Nicola will know this, they're always out there. Okay, we're all governed by the numbers of staff we have, and Nicola certainly is, because it's a difficult area. And let's face it, a lot of people these days get very upset if they're challenged about waste in the back. If somebody's caught out, it's never their fault. And so what I'm saying here is we will obviously take this very seriously. It's a zero tolerance policy as far as I'm concerned. If someone is caught fly tipping, or someone is guilty of it, or if we can prove it by looking through whatever rubbish is left, then we will do something about it. Go on.
Thank you, Councillor Wakeham. I was trying to not only take into fly tipping, but the general demeanour around our streets and our back lanes. As you know, I took the service director and the chief executive around my ward because I was frustrated beyond belief. So what I'm asking for is, and incidentally, if we're not emptying our responsibility, where we've got our rubbish bins that are strewn and full, I went around my ward the weekend and they were nearly there. So are we issuing fixed penalty notices to ourselves? Because how are we setting an example to others when we allow our bins throughout the summer to overflow and pollute the area?
Thank you, Councillor Coker. I understand your point and your frustrations. I would say that we now have 6 new litter bin lift vans. And one of the big problems that we had before was the unreliability. So now we're getting new vehicles on the scene. We hope to have a much better collection service, so it should be very much improved. And again, if it's not, email me, because I'll be obviously chasing my officers around that, because I want to see, the same as all of us do, a nice, clean, tidy city. And incidentally, we have cut a lot of back lanes, and in your area as well. Yes, so I thought you might, and we've worked very hard there to get that end of Plymouth cleaned up.
I never doubted that, and I didn't imply that you hadn't. Your officers, as I said, have worked really hard to do it. But on the other hand, we can't expect people to keep their environment clean and tidy when we can't fulfil our own obligations.
Yes, thank you. I do understand that. But as I said, with the addition of these new vehicles, hopefully in the future, the service will be a lot better. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Riley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, our first question is going to be of reinforcing some stuff that we talked about. I'm going to go back to garden waste, but it is linked into the recycling element. And the second, the supplementary, I warned Councillor Wakeham, is going to be around fly tipping, and probably not from the angle that other people go. And I'll just simply say where I live, the bins are collected regularly and the streets are clean. So thank you for that. But I'm just going to draw the scenario on this because we've got members of the public watching this, and I want to just make sure we've got this 100% right. Can I go through the scenario and get officers just to trip me up if I've got it wrong? So I want to I'll phone up and I want to register for garden waste. They do a search on my address. I'm looking at the website. I've got a bin. They identify the bin. I pay the money and they give me a sticker to stick on that bin. If I want 2 permits, I'll pay 2 lots of money, they give me a sticker and another bin and a sticker. Great. If I decide that I don't want to subscribe to the service and I want to go down the green environment and I want to do my own recycling or composting, I can say, I'm not signing up for this service. You're not going to come and take my bin. Can I use that bin to take my garden waste? Because I'm asking this specific question, I know I can take it Chelsea Meadow, but I live in the north of the city. Will I be able to take it to Western Mill free of charge? The garden waste?
Sorry, do you say you're going to use your bin as a container to take your waste?
Yes.
Or are you going to, right?
Yeah,
So
in the back of my state car or my trailer.
So, Western Mill does accept garden waste,
Western Mill and Chelsea.
But if you were going to return your bin, then we were only accepting that at Chelsen just because of capacity there.
No, I'm not going to.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going to use it as a receptacle.
Yes,
You've
you
said
could
it's,
do that.
it's a cost to you to recover the 10,000 bins or whatever it is.
Yes, you can.
Just
you
as
can
a
use
point of order, can we bring it back to the budget scrutiny?
Yeah,
please,
I'm bringing it right back to that now. I'm just confirming that I can take that. That's fine. Right.
You can effectively keep the bin, and you could. We might post some YouTube videos of how you can convert it into a compost. There's all sorts of things you could do.
And just the bin that if I subscribe to another bin, I'll get the same bin as already got 2 identical bins.
If that's what you prefer.
got a
Sometimes
black bin
people
at
might
the
want a
moment.
smaller one,
Right.
or whatever you select. Yeah.
Okay, so going into the supplementary, but it is the main question really. Talking about the fly tipping, there's not a lot of fly tipping where I live, but I accept there is in some areas of the city. And I actually believe, no, it's not an excuse if the authority miss a bin here or there. It's not an excuse for people to just leave their rubbish around. I think if you're a member of a responsible society, you've got responsibility in that society to keep where you live safe and clean and avert rats and all the rest of it. So I don't accept that argument. And that's not an excuse for residents to chuck stuff on the floor because we missed a bin collection 1 week. I'm sorry. So there we go. And I want to say this, which I think is quite important. In your remit, it says green estate management, environmental enforcement and recycling. I know it's not our responsibility, before everybody shouts at me, but Plymouth Parkway is an absolute disgrace running through this city. Anybody visiting or passing through, it's an absolute disgrace. What plastic is going into the environment, into our wildlife, into our courses, water courses and everything else, have you explored the possibility, could it be a recommendation come through, to go to Plymouth, to go to Highways England and say to them, because you can't be bothered collecting the waste off of Parkway, we'll do it for you, charge you for it, and there might be a little bit of income, and we can make the city safer, environmentally more friendly, and it looks better for people turning up here. Is that a possibility? Thank you, Chair.
Hey, we must stick to the budget and the budget scrutiny we've got. So if you could consider it as an income stream, led, yeah.
Chair, thanks very much. I can answer that very quickly. Yeah, it is our responsibility as the Litter Authority. It falls under Councillor Dreen's responsibility. He has spoken to National Highways on a number of occasions. They won't change their mind. It's down to us. We try and undertake a cleanse twice a year. It's anything from £30,000 to £35,000 to do that. I totally get your point. We couldn't do it anymore because of the TM that's required to put in place, but it is our responsibility.
Councillor Kelly, please.
Can I just add one thing, please? Just to close this down. This decision was not called in when it went to cut. Worth making. Thank you. We're back on garden waste.
So can we just clarify what point wasn't called in?
Garden waste.
Okay, thank you for clarification.
Okay, I think that's neither here. Anyway,
Councillor Kelly, please.
I did write to Philip about what Councillor Riley just mentioned with regards to the Parkway. Back to fly tipping, unfortunately. South Hams recently introduced, they've said that there was an increase in fly tipping. I think it's very naive and blinkered to say that there won't be potential increases. Picking up on Councillor Finn's sort of potential recommendation, in the hierarchy of needs, Philip, or hierarchy of waste, at the moment, you will be encouraged to smash whatever you've got up from a DIY point of view to get into a bag. And Councillor Wakeham, if you look, it's £2.40 a bag and £6 for plasterboard. So unless you're giving it a discount of £1.50, there's quite a marked difference. So you've got your bag. Well, clearly you want to try to reduce your cost as much as you can. So you're going to smash things up to get as much into a bag as you can. Yet the whole ethos of what we have been saying in the past was it could be an income stream where you take a bath, a shower, a toilet, whatever, intact, take it out carefully, and rather than being charged for it, you're delighted that you're getting rid of it, but somebody else would come along and potentially buy that from the council, and you've got such a big site down there, it would almost be a potential second-hand DIY, and that would encourage more reuse. It would mean that the people that are doing DIY to improve their homes aren't penalised, because ultimately, at £2.40 a bag, be it weighed by a trailer, 20, 30, 40, 50 quid a shout to get rid of some stuff, people will invariably look to offload that somewhere. And I'd just like clarification with regards to the previous question about monies in the budget for fly tipping. In the past, I was told that the average cost of a fly tip to the council and therefore the local taxpayer is somewhere around about £93 per incident. At 5,500 incidents, which is what you've just quoted us last year, that's over £500,000. So it's potentially false economy to be taking on the one hand charging, but ultimately knowing you're going to have an increase, although you deny there's going to be an increase, and in between all that, whether Councillor Riley's right or whether Councillor Coker's right, the environment that we live in looks worse, and Parkway is an example where people's behaviours are not right, but if they're driven to save money, then they will take the easiest option for them in their pocket, which is to put it into a hedge, put it in a road, put it in a lake, and unfortunately it's the rest of us that have to see that, but ultimately the tab comes back as a councillor to say, could you please come and clear this up? And then we get upset when you don't go and do it, and I don't know if you want every fly tipping incident to go to you, Mr. Councillor Wakeham, but you'll be inundated.
I think to work. Thanks, Chair. Councillor Kelly, you're absolutely right, and the point you make is a very good one, and it's precisely why we are focusing on the reuse and the reduce. A couple of years ago, we did a feasibility study at Charleston to see if we could develop, as they do in Exeter, a reuse shop, which is functions exceptionally well. For a number of reasons, capacity, availability of resource, we didn't proceed with that work. But hand in glove with the charging, you're absolutely right. Rather than pay to get rid of your perfectly functioning sink, tiles, whatever, you take them to a reuse shop free of charge, and we sell them on and we reuse. So ideally, we'd have both working at the same time together. But as Councillor Wakeham said at the very beginning, Councillor Poyser has a number of good ideas and using his experience and expertise to develop this partnership across Plymouth to see how we can develop that further. But the point you make is a very good one.
I think just for clarification purposes on the general fund budget for 2003-24, we have total income 39.2 million, total income 21.709, and net budget of 17.491. What's the biggest driver of the 21 million in income, please? Just for the benefit of the committee. Yeah, it's on the City General Budget Fund for Street and Waste Services, and it'll be the second line down under Street Scene and Waste Services. As I said, yeah, what's driving the 21.709 in income, please? It leaves us with a net 17. So would that include the new waste charges as well within that figure, or is that on top?
I'm not sure I understand the question, sorry, Chair.
When we look at total income, obviously you were talking about the income streams into waste management. Would that, the 21.709 include the additional charges from the green waste?
Yeah, it will be in there. Sorry.
In for budget year 23-24, all the income streams that we've talked about today within this service area would have been built into the income lines. Yes, and they would have been accounted for. It will include other income streams. Philip's picked up on one, which is the PFI credit, which is a significant amount annually from DEFRA, and there's a, we could give you a whole list if you wanted a breakdown of it. That would be easy to do, but I haven't got it to hand as we currently sit here.
Thank you very much again for your clarification. Councillor Lowry, please.
I was going to finish on a high. I take it you're also the councillor for green estate management, it says, and I note in the capital programme there's Plymouth and South Devon Community Forest. I take it that's under yourself, Councillor Wakeham.
Yes.
And it looks like we've got some substantial sums of money there to the tune of some £8.64 million. That's a lot of money for a forest and trees. You know, how are we going to assure ourselves? I mean, it's a great story. I'm just surprised we're not talking about it more, given the subject of trees being quite such a vocal one at the moment. You know, how many trees are you planting, you know, the next year for £6 million? Is a lot of trees, that is, surely, isn't it? Come on, give us some good news.
I will, Councillor Larry, I will indeed. Well, so far this year, the winter tree programme has obviously started, and we're aiming to plant 5,700. So that's a lot of trees, and this fantastic achievement will add to the community forest, of course. And I think you'll recall that last August, I think it was, that DEFRA announced that we got this money, and you know, it's a fantastic amount, and hopefully what we're going to be doing this year is to see in a bit, well, I'm sure we'll see a very big difference around the city and the area in general. And I'm not sure if people are aware generally, but this community forest will extend into West Devon, so into Duchy Land, and also way out into the South Hams. The border will be the River Avon, in actual fact, which is Abbott and Gifford. So, you know, this has got huge potential. So it's not a forest in one area. As somebody said to me, well, how can you create a forest? It is because it's spread out over a vast acreage. And, you know, it's going to be magnificent. Probably no good for me in my time, but for our future generations, I think it'll be a wonderful asset. And, you know, help to keep our air clean. Thank you.
Can I just come in there, Chair?
Yes.
There's been a lot of criticism of forest tree planting, that it's been the wrong type of trees and they've not been nurtured properly, watered properly, so they've died. So is there anything in this budget to make sure that we've got the right type of trees, the right type of watering, etc., etc.? Because obviously that could be quite expensive in a budget where we have to replant them.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think obviously I'd be very concerned if I heard that trees weren't being properly looked after and were being planted in the wrong areas, because as far as I'm aware, we always make sure that the conditions, whether it's on the coast or whether it's inland, are suitable for that particular type of tree. And I know we look at that very carefully and take it very seriously. And if they're not watered, Councillor Aspinall, I'd like to know about it, so please inform me, because I'm very much a tree man and I'm probably the greenest Conservative you'll ever get. So thank you.
I'm still waiting for that tree to be trimmed down in my ward that I spoke to you back in November, so you're losing your credentials there, so I'm sorry.
Contrary to popular belief, Councillor Wakeham isn't green. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Wakeman, I wouldn't want to be your inbox, love. I really would. Between fly tipping and trees, you're going to be inundated. But on a different note, can I talk to you about fixed penalty notices? That does obviously come under your remit, doesn't it? How much did you earn this year? And how much are you expecting to earn next year? Because we're full aware that fixed penalty notice, the cost of that has to cover the cost of the staffing and everything else. So I'm interested to know. And Also, are we still quite high up on our penalties? Because if you come outside the council house, I could probably get you a whole ashtray of cigarette ends. So I'm just wondering how often the areas are being covered. I'm not guilty.
Well, certainly on the problem of cigarette ends and cigarette butts, I think Nicola will reinforce this, but we could certainly do with more staff wandering around the city. Again, as far as I'm concerned, it's a zero tolerance attitude towards anybody who's caught littering in whatever form, because we have to clamp down on this. But yes, it is a problem getting the staff who are brave enough to go up to the individual and say, I've just seen you doing this and you've got a fixed penalty notice. And some people now, as we all know, are so damned abrasive. I mean, I've met it myself in the parks when I've been on, if you like, dog patrol. And, I had one really nasty character. So I can understand the staffing problem that Nicola has, but I'll let you talk about these, Nicola. Thank you.
Yeah, we have really struggled with staffing in the last 12 to 18 months. So we have a number of vacancies currently. So that's obviously impacted on the number of fixed penalty notices for envirocrime. If I talk about envirocrime being the people patrolling the streets looking for offences of cigarette littering and dog control. So our numbers are still, they're still relatively high, but actually it would be great to have a number of more staff to deliver that. And in terms of income, that does make a small surplus that actually goes to support all the other waste enforcement that we do across rear lane fly tipping and littering as well. So there are rules on how you spend income from fixed penalty notices. It's got to be on enforcement of waste functions, and that's what the money is spent on, supporting the other part of the team in actually patrolling rear lanes and finding evidence.
Supplementary, Chair. So I'll come to you, Nicola. It's probably easier. So are we covering our costs at the moment? That's what I'm interested in.
For the envirocrime team, yes. Yes, we are.
Thank you. Mine's probably directed more to officers than you, Councillor Wakeham. Looking at the capital budget for the next few years, we all know that the way we treat our weeds around the city with chemicals, there is a high probability that those toxic materials could well be banned in the future. I know we've got weed rippers in the budget, but what I was hoping to see there was some money put aside to really invest in the future. We're always going to have to clean up weeds, etc. But looking at different methods, Councillor Wakeham, or officers, but there doesn't seem to be anything in there that I can see based on current trends.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Coker. Well, in actual fact, Andy and Philip will reinforce what I'm saying here, but we have tried different methods. We haven't yet found anything to replace the current form of getting rid of weeds, but we have used burners and tried them and various other ways of disposing of them. But the point in the long term is, until we get a more proven method, I'm afraid we're going to have to continue with what we've got, unless we want somewhere like Brighton, where you've got a green policy with weeds 8 foot tall in some places. So I don't think any of us want that. So we have to combat it in the best way we can. Thank you.
Okay, I wasn't going to get into the merits of what Brighton or any other council are doing. In the current, again, we've got, I'm going to relate it to climate emergency, reducing our carbon footprint, reducing chemical usage. Where if we don't start investing in alternative methods, I appreciate we've looked at foam or whatever, but I don't believe we've run a consistently long trial to actually get proper results. And if we don't invest in that, we'll still be having this conversation until the government change the rules?
I can only agree with you. We obviously are looking at all different forms of trying to get rid of weeds. I go out with the teams and I listen to them as well. And I know that, it seems ridiculous that in 2023, we're still hoeing weeds by hand. But we have to, because obviously in certain areas, we can't spray. You know, obviously we're very conscious of schools or public buildings, whatever it might be, especially where there are children around. So we are very careful. And, hopefully in the very near future, we will have another form of getting rid of weeds, but we haven't yet.
Thank you for that response, Councillor Wakeham. The only point I would say is if we're going to be serious about this commitment, then actually a commitment in the capital programme to look at stuff in the future would be a great step forward.
Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I thought we were finishing at 2:15, but anyway, that's great. I've got more time. Back to enforcement. Firstly, a thank you. I know Mutley and the back lanes have been a real problem, and I appreciate the enforcement that's been involved. We're talking about monies and I suppose value for money, and I know it's expensive to have officers go out and look, but could or have you looked at the wider implications that going out and having a purge on cigarette litter, as much as I think that is an awful thing to throw your cigarette butt down, the general perception with the public is if you spent more time perhaps pursuing big fly tips, you would actually end up being far more cost effective with regards to driving the right behaviours, because people would feel that the chances of doing it and getting caught are very, very high, rather than picking on what I would argue are soft targets. And that will help our budget, because the bigger the fly tip, the more expensive it is to basically clear up. Whereas a cigarette butt, as much as I don't agree with smoking full stop and dropping it, that doesn't have the blight that it has on communities where they are consistently faced with, in the back lanes, fly tips, and big fly tips. I'm not just talking about an odd bag. I'm talking about mattresses, sinks. Well, you've seen it. You know what it is. So I suppose my question is, what have you done within the budget to put adequate resources to invest to save in the long run from cleaning up fly tips, which clearly you say isn't going to go up, but even if we stood still at 5,500, that's a huge cost to the council and the local taxpayer that could be used far more productively on other services.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. I understand exactly what you're saying, and I agree with you. But I think again it comes down to combined resources. We need more people out there, quite simply. And as we've already said, recruitment for that type of work is a major problem. I mean, I know very well that Nicola has a very difficult job in getting recruitment and getting them to stay once she's got them in and trained them. I think we've lost so many when they find, obviously, the problems of combating people who can turn very nasty when they're caught out and when they're guilty. And this is the problem. I don't think, unless we put a lot more more resources into it financially, that we're ever going to be able to combat the problem. So I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, I'll bring Nicola in, Councillor Kelly, Chair. Sorry, I think there are a number of ways we need to look at this. I think over the last couple of years, Nicola's department and street services have been working a lot closer, whether it's highways using CCTV, or whether it's our waste crews, or even our collection crews, providing that intelligence on the ground and working across both departments. But I think it's got to be a sort of a joint approach to a problem that, some would describe as increasing, holding steady. It doesn't matter. We don't want any fly tipping. No. The point you make about the cigarette butts, I'll let Nicola comment on, but as a general comment, I suppose it goes back to what we consider as a council, consider as acceptable service standards. It's the same with the weeds. We need to have some honest conversations about what is acceptable and where we want to draw that line in terms of setting those standards. But in terms of the specific points around cigarette butts.
Yes, the focus on cigarette butts was obviously a political priority for us to do that, and it does help to fund the enforcement of the other part of the work as well. So there is that to consider. But actually, we have two separate teams of staff. Really, we're within my team. I've got some of the team patrolling the city streets and parks, and then I've got other investigating officers who also go out separately and find evidence and getting evidence from Philip's team as well. Their staff will provide us information to work on. But what you say about mattresses, it's really hard to identify who puts a mattress in a lane. It's really, really difficult. And, we can go and do door knocking to try and see, has anybody seen anything? But people actually often don't want to either shop their neighbours or get involved in a case because if they've witnessed something, we probably would want them to come provide us with a statement and come to court. So it is really difficult, but we have been using CCTV in different areas. We've put signs up over the city to say we're using CCTV, and we're moving those cameras around in efforts to try and solve it. So, yes, it would be nice to have more officers out and about, but, we're doing the best that we can with what we have currently. But yeah.
Nicola, supplementary, Chair. But the point that I'm trying to get across is that it is costing us as a local authority and therefore taxpayer if we consistently and quite rightly go up and clean up other people's mess. So what I'm asking within the budget, have you considered perhaps being strong on the enforcement side with the resources rather than being reactive to clear it up? Because until you take a lead and start to, I suppose, clamp down, cigarettes, it's very much in the public gaze. It's all the people that were listed that have been caught and fined, but that is a far easier and softer option than perhaps some of the big serial fly tips in very well-known areas. So it's having the will to put the logistics in to clamp down, and you might move it from position A to position B. I accept that, but what you will do is send a very powerful message, because at the moment, it's not as if it's not costing us anything. It's costing us a great deal of money to clear up, and it's trying to say prevention is far better than trying to basically cure it after the event.
Yeah, if I could just come back on that particular point, because if somebody disposes of a mattress, in the back lanes in Mutley Plain, the cost of disposing that mattress is exactly the same as if they took it to Cheltenham. The disposal costs of that particular item will be the same. Yeah, because you're taking a mattress to Cheltenham, it then gets incinerated, or whether you pick it up and take it to the incinerator, the cost of disposal of the waste is the same. The collection costs and the policing costs, if you like, are the things that we need to factor in, and that's where we will continue to work together with the Nicola's department. But waste is waste, and the tonnage is the tonnage, and that's not going to change whether somebody fly tips it or whether they take it to the tip.
I'm sorry, I totally disagree with that. So what you're saying is that if I take my mattress to the tip, one, I'm going to get charged a fee now to get rid of it. Well, it's non-domestic waste.
Oh, your mattress, sorry.
Yeah. So if I put it in the back lane surreptitiously, you've got to send a team out to pick it up, to take it. Well, that's personnel hours and wear and tear and fuel. So I can't see how it's not more expensive. I'm sorry, I don't follow your argument there at all.
Okay, I think one's going to agree to disagree on that one. Just to make members aware, we're running into the last 5 minutes now. We've got Councillor Hayes and Poyser and Councillor Lowry. If you'd like to make your questions, please, clear and concise, and can I ask that the panel give a response that's clear and short, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Through you again. Can I just have clarification? We've talked an awful lot about reuse, recycling and everything like that. Looking at the north of the city, Western Mill, I did try and pick it up with you a minute ago with one of my first questions. It was always one of your commitments as a Conservative Party to open it full time when you were trying to be elected. It hasn't opened full time. Is it not going to open full time? Is it going to stay the same hours? I'm just thinking about more recycling and more use.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. I don't think I ever personally promised it would be open full time. Sorry?
No, you personally.
No, I didn't, no. And you might sound part of it. wanted to make sure it stayed open. That's the only thing I ever promised. I said it was a red line for me. We wouldn't ever close it. And as I said, while I'm doing this job, it'll stay open. But it's got to stay open under the present hours, so that's 4 days. And obviously that's when it's most used. So that's Friday, Saturday, Sunday and Monday. And I think most of the residents now around your area are pretty much used to that. So, you know, I think they're all happy with it. So unless we really need to look at this policy again, we will keep it as it is. So thank you for your question.
There's no supplementary. I just wanted to know the hours of opening more than anything else. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Poyser, please.
Thank you, Chair. In some of the other scrutiny sessions, we heard about the Alliance and the good work they're doing. Maybe there's an opportunity to replicate some kind of cross community group type style of working. I know there's some very active litter picking groups. There's other friends of groups within the city as well. Does the budget consider the involvement of community groups in lowering the costs and improving the way we deliver services within the city? And if it isn't, could that be a recommendation that
Yeah, I think that, no, absolutely right. I mean, we rely not heavily, but to a degree on community groups. Plimpton litter pickers close to me do a fantastic job of supplementing our existing waste collection or litter collection. You know, they still have to be managed. They still have to be directed, and I suppose from a health and safety perspective, we just need to make sure that they're not let loose on the city. But absolutely, I think the point you make is a valid one, and I think there's more we can do in that respect. But we have to manage that against our existing resources.
Quick, Chair. So, yeah, I don't get too much into litter picking politics, but other groups as well, Clean Our Patch, that are really active as well across the whole of the city. Yeah, I'd just like to see if there's a way in which the council can coordinate more of those services and a way in which we lower the costs as well to other kind of street scene type services which we pay for as well. Plus also the friends of groups as well. I know there's groups being set up, some are active, then some of them are willing to be more involved in managing our green spaces. How can we enable that and again lower costs to the taxpayer?
Just for clarification, with regard to voluntary groups, if say community payback was involved from say probation, getting the offenders working in the communities, would there be any conflict with the employees or employee legislation with regard to using them, local councillors and using them in their community for clean up, for example?
We do use them quite extensively, actually. Nearly every week we've got a gang working usually in an area of focus. Yeah. There is some consideration of overlap with responsibilities, but it tends to be the most sort of manual work, like manually clearing weeds, graffiti, that sort of thing. So we've squared that off previously, and it's quite established across the council. So like parking services use them, community connections. So it's quite, yeah, it's a good point, but I don't think there's a conflict really of interest there.
So maybe a resource councillors can use to obviously reduce and clean up areas. Okay, lovely. Councillor Lowry, to bring it to a close, please.
You try to be helpful. There's been a lot of frustration and debate around fly tipping enforcement, green bins, so on and so forth. And there's a substantial change taking place. So therefore, can I put forward a recommendation that we as a committee consider making a recommendation to the Environmental Department along with the Enforcement Department in the methodology in which they work together over the coming months to ensure some of the concerns we've got are addressed. And we can think of that, we can look at that in more detail during our meeting tomorrow. Yeah. But I think those two departments working closer together is going to be fundamental in the coming months. So if we can perhaps think of a recommendation around that, please, Chair.
Yeah, Councillor, I consider that totally reasonable and one that we'll make a note of and obviously take that forward tomorrow. Needless to,
yeah,
Anthony,
we'll take
yes.
that forward Councillor Larry.
We haven't agreed
Oh well, we will do. Well, depending on what you're going to agree, I'll.
There's your chance.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm not going to say no. I'm not going to say that in a public forum. No, absolutely not. But could I just, Chair, indulge me for 2 seconds because I want to go back to something Councillor Larry said earlier, and I didn't have the figures to hand, but you raised the point about tree planting. And I just wanted to give you the figures because I've now got them. I managed to find them. So in the last 2 years, we've planted 10,600 trees across the city, and over this calendar year, we'll be planting over 5,700. And we got 30 this calendar year, and we got 30 tree planting schemes in place for this year, linked to community forest and so on. So it's just to give you a bit of detail, Councillor Larry, which I didn't have to hand earlier.
It leaves me to say thank you, Councillor Wakeham and the team for your time and your input this afternoon in the scrutiny process. As for members, we've got a time for reflection.